All right, we're here at the Councilwoman for the 11th District, covering the Palisades, Traci Park, who's been on with us frequently. Traci, I've been talking to people for an hour here, and people are still at the highest level of anger over everything. How can, after a year, none of the major questions be answered, and every piece of news is another bombshell? Nobody understands what's been going on and is still going on.
Yeah, John, it's a really good question, and I don't know how to account for this. You know, I was very, very clear in the immediate aftermath of the fire that the LAFD absolutely, under no circumstances, should be investigating itself. I called for, and the council approved, an outside independent inquiry. That is one of several that are either underway or have been completed. But watching this information trickle out headline by headline, detail by detail, when we haven't had a full accounting and reckoning of the events that occurred and didn't occur on January 7th in the lead up, has compounded the anger and the frustration.
When you see 7 different versions of the report, and we found out this morning it had been sent to the mayor's office, and the mayor's office wanted further refinements, well, nobody's going to believe anything.
Well, and therein lies the problem. Whether the revisions or the changes that were made were intended to hide or mislead, it doesn't even really matter. The perception of it is that it wasn't accurate and it wasn't transparent. And we walk away from it wholly unsatisfied. So I want to actually thank Chief Moore for his remarks yesterday at Fire Commission, acknowledging finally the mistakes that were made, because really that is the first step in the accountability, which is fixing the circumstances that allowed this to happen.
One thing I hear from talking to people, no one can believe that every level of government failed and has continued to fail for a year, and nobody wants to own up or explain anything.
Well, you know, it very well may be the case that the lawsuit is the only way that people are going to get answers. And I've said this before, you know, the consolidated complaint actually seems to be one of the most comprehensive recitation of the events of that day. But a crying shame that that's what it takes. I mean, the reality is there is enough blame to go around. There are layers of responsibility, and there are layers based on decades of failure that lined up in a collision course for the catastrophe on January 7th.
Yeah, it's hard to believe that everything went wrong and that everybody screwed up at the same time and continuously ever since. It's just hard to fathom. And I'm telling you, a lot of people are wondering if there's some darker issue here, because you see the title of this event, They Let Us Burn.
Well, you know, I understand the sentiment and the frustration behind it. You know, literally, you know, you talk about how did everything fail? Literally everything. Yeah. The evacuation routes, the water system, the communications, the timeliness, literally catastrophic systems failure. But it was decades of bad management and failure to invest taxpayer dollars in adequate infrastructure and public safety that were going to be necessary to keep this or any community safe.
The state park reps kicking out the LA Fire Department at the hot spot where the fire reignited to save the milk vetch plant from being trampled.
I don't even think the milk vetch weed is still there. So I think there's a very, very important and painful lesson to be learned. These policies have to be balanced against the potentially catastrophic outcomes like we saw here.
Do you have many allies on the city council to help fix all this? Because most of the council is very quiet at best.
I have been very grateful for the support that I've had from a number of my colleagues over the last year. But yes, as the news cycles shift, as other crises and emergencies emerge, attention spans are short, and you know, unfortunately for 99% of Los Angeles, life has moved on. And my job as our local council member who represents the Palisades and other communities impacted by this is to make sure these stories stay in the headlines and that government is held accountable.
You're going to run for re-election? You're going to keep at it?
I am. My work here is not done. The sense of responsibility and obligation that I feel to help the Palisades community get further on their journey home I've got to see Venice through the Olympics, and the incredible progress that we've made already on homelessness isn't finished. I have more to do, and I have more to do right here on the West Side.
Thank you for coming on with us, Traci.
Always, John. See you soon.
All right.